The call came in at 11:53 on a Tuesday in November, from a number the king of the Vayne Court had given to exactly one person, and that person was 7 years old. Clara Voss had been a neonatal intensive care nurse for 9 years, which meant she knew what shock looked like from the inside. She knew the tunnel narrowing at the edges of her vision was not a migraine. She knew the cold spreading from her fingertips inward was not the apartment's broken radiator. She knew that the way her legs had simply stopped cooperating 40 minutes ago, dropping her against the kitchen wall with her back to the cabinets and her cheek against the linoleum, was a medical event and not clumsiness. She also knew that Derek had put something in the coffee. She had not wanted to believe it. She had made herself review the logic twice, the way she reviewed medication charts when a dosage looked wrong, checking her own reasoning for the error that would let her be wrong. The coffee had tasted faintly of something she could not name. Her coordination had degraded over 20 minutes rather than suddenly, which ruled out a fall. Derek had left without a word at 11:10, and he had not asked how she was feeling before he left, which was the tell, because Derek always asked how she was feeling when he wanted something from her. He had wanted something from her. He had wanted her unconscious and unavailable when someone came to the door at midnight. She did not know who was coming to the door. She had learned not to ask Derek questions that made him feel underestimated. Eli was in the doorway of the kitchen. He was wearing his blue pajamas with the worn patch at the left knee, and he was holding his stuffed rabbit by one ear, which he only did when he was afraid, but trying not to show it. He was 7 years old, and he had her eyes and someone else's bone structure, and he had been standing in that doorway for 8 minutes watching her breathe. Eli, her voice came out wrong. Too slow. I need you to get my phone. I already have it. He crossed the kitchen in 4 steps and put it in her hand. Her fingers closed around it with more difficulty than they should have. Good boy. She meant it. Now go to your room and lock the door. Mum, Eli, room, lock. He went. She heard the lock click. She looked at the phone. She had 3 numbers she could call. Her sister in Portland, who would panic and be useless for the first 10 minutes, and useful after that, but 10 minutes was too long. The building super, Misty, Danforth, who was 63 and arthritic and had a heart condition, and who she had categorically forbidden herself to put in danger. And the 3rd number, which was not a person she knew well, which she had been given 4 months ago in a hospital corridor by a man who had noticed the bruise on her wrist and said, without any particular drama, if you ever need someone, use this. She had thought about that conversation many times in the 4 months since. She had decided, on balance, that calling the number would create more problems than it solved. She was capable of handling her own problems. She had been handling them since she was 19. Her vision tunneled another degree. She called the 3rd number. It rang twice. The voice that answered was low and clear and unhurried. Clara. She had not told him her name at the hospital. She noted this distantly and filed it for later. I need help. She was proud of how level her voice came out. I think I've been drugged. I can't stand up. My son is 7 and he's alone in the apartment, and I don't know if someone is coming here at midnight or not. A pause. Not hesitation, the kind of absolute quiet that belongs to a person who has already decided what they are going to do and is simply confirming the details. Your address. She gave it. Floor and unit number. She gave those too. Stay on the line. I may lose consciousness. Then your son will stay on the line. What is his name? Eli. Tell Eli the firm coming. 4 months earlier, the king of the Vayne Court had been at St. Ambrose Medical Centre on the 3rd floor, in the hallway outside room 312, because Aldrich had needed a transfusion, and Aldrich was old enough and important enough that the king did not send someone else. He had been there for 40 minutes, and he had been patient, which was not his natural state, when a nurse came out of the room across the hall with a tablet in one hand and a look on her face that he recognized. He had been alive for 411 years, and he had seen that look on the faces of people who were managing damage they had not chosen and could not yet afford to stop managing. The bruise on her wrist was old enough to be yellowing at the edges, which meant it was not the first one. She noticed him looking. Most people did not notice him looking, because he had long practice at making himself appear to be looking at something else. She noticed anyway, and she met his eyes without flinching, and she said, "Can I help you with something?" No. He reached into his jacket and produced a card with a single number on it and nothing else, and held it out. "But I may be able to help you." She looked at the card. She looked at him. "I'm not in danger," she said. "You are." He kept his voice at the same register he used for negotiating territorial rights, calm and specific and without judgment. "You may not choose to call. That is your choice. But if you do need someone, that number will reach me directly." She took the card. She did not thank him. He had not expected her to. In the elevator going down, Aldrich said, "You gave her your direct line." "Yes, you have not given anyone your direct line in 60 years. I am aware." Aldrich said nothing else. He was wise enough after 300 years of service to know when a conversation was finished. Now the king of the Vayne Court was sitting across a table from Pieter Vel, who controlled the eastern trade routes and who had been, until approximately 30 seconds ago, about to sign a compact that would have opened those routes to Vayne Court goods for the next century. The room was on the 41st floor of the Aldermere Hotel, all dark glass and Macallan 18 and the kind of deliberately neutral decor that signals serious money without celebrating it. 4 of Vel's people sat along the left wall, 3 of Calder's sat along the right. Everyone had been in the room for 2 hours, and the air had the particular quality of something nearly finished. The phone in the king's breast pocket did not ring. It vibrated once, with a sound like a single note played very low. He looked at it under the table. The number. He stood up. "Your Majesty." Pieter Vel was a man who did not like to be interrupted. "We are in the middle of a negotiation. We are finished for tonight." The king was already moving toward the door. "Aldrich will contact you in the morning." "I have flown in from Warsaw." "I know." The king did not slow down. "Aldrich will contact you in the morning." He was in the corridor before Vel's chair had finished scraping back. Behind him he heard his second, Aldrich, smooth things over with the practiced ease of a man who had been smoothing things over for 3 centuries. He did not wait to hear how it went. He called the number back as he reached the car. She answered. Her voice was wrong, which was the first thing that struck him, because in the 4 months since he had given her his card, he had wondered what she would sound like when she called, and he had not imagined it sounding like that. Like something being held together by a person who was very good at holding things together and was approaching the limit. He listened. He asked for the address. He asked for the floor and the unit. Then he asked for her son's name and told her to give Eli the phone, and he spoke to a 7-year-old boy for 38 minutes while his driver covered the distance between the Aldermere Hotel and the Sable District apartment block at the kind of speed that relied on a Vayne Court understanding with the city's traffic enforcement. Eli was, in the king's assessment, one of the most composed people he had ever spoken to. "Is she breathing?" he asked. "Yes, her chest is still going up and down." "I'm watching." "Good, keep watching. Tell me what you see. Her lips look a little blue." "How little?" "Like she's cold. Not like really bad blue, just a little." "That is good information. You are doing exactly the right thing." He watched the Aldermere's lights recede in the rear window. How long ago did she stop answering you? About 4 minutes after she gave me the phone. She said my name and then she stopped. When she stopped, did she move or twitch? She kind of slid down more. She was already against the wall. She slid down, so now she's sort of lying on her side. That is better than on her back. Is the door to the apartment locked? A pause. The king heard small feet moving across the floor. There's a chain on it. I can do the chain. Should I? Yes, the chain slid into place. Eli, I want you to stay near your mother and keep telling me what you see. I am going to count down the minutes for you. Okay, a breath. Are you far away? 12 minutes. Okay, another breath. Then, in the same steady voice, she's not going to die, is she? It was not quite a question. The king recognized the grammar. It was the sentence of a person who already knows the most frightening answer and is asking for the less frightening one. No, he said, she is not going to die. Keep watching her chest. Okay, 11 minutes. In the apartment on the 8th floor of the Sable District block, Clara Voss lay on the linoleum in the kitchen, where she had been a nurse and a mother, and a person who handled her own problems. And she breathed in the shallow mechanical way her body had committed to, without her permission. And Eli sat 3 feet away from her with the phone pressed to his ear and watched her chest and reported what he saw. 10 minutes. Eli said, still breathing, still the same. The king said, good, 9 minutes. The building super, Mr. Danforth, was watching a late program on the television in his ground floor unit and did not hear the sound a car makes when it stops very fast. 8 minutes. Eli said, I think she moved. Her hand moved a little. The king said, which direction? Eli said, toward me, I think. Like she was reaching. 7 minutes. Clara's breathing changed. Eli did not know the clinical name for what he was hearing, but he described it accurately. It's gotten faster. And there's a sound with it, like when you breathe through your nose when it's stuffed up. The king said, I am 5 minutes away. Keep talking to her. Eli put his mouth near his mother's ear and said, in a voice that was very steady for a 7-year-old, Mum, someone's coming. You just have to wait 5 minutes. You're good at waiting. He had heard her say that to patients. He had heard her say it through a hospital room door when she thought he was not listening. He did not know if it would work on her the way it worked on them, but he said it anyway, because it was the most useful thing he knew. 6 minutes. 4 minutes and 40 seconds. The chain on the front door holds for exactly as long as chains on apartment doors hold against someone who does not need to use a key. Eli heard the chain snap. He did not run. He pressed himself against the wall beside his mother with the phone still in his ear and he said, something broke. The king said, that was me. The door to the kitchen opened. The man who stood in it was tall and dark-haired, wearing a suit that cost more than 3 months of Clara's rent, and his eyes in the kitchen's fluorescent light were the colour of old amber gone pale at the centre. He took in the room in one sweep, Eli against the wall, Clara on the floor, the faint sweetness in the air that told him what had been in the coffee before Clara could. He crossed the room in 4 steps and crouched beside her. His hands, when he touched her face and tipped her jaw and checked her airway and her pulse, were completely steady. Eli. He did not look up. Is there a medical kit in this apartment? Under the bathroom sink. Mum keeps one. Go get it. Walk, don't run. Eli walked. The king assessed her. Her pulse was present and weak, and her breathing was shallow but continuous. The compound in her system was pharmaceutical in origin, not supernatural, which told him several things about Derek that he filed for later. He produced a small case from his inside jacket pocket, opened it, and administered a counteragent in a way that would have required very specific pharmacological knowledge to perform, and that he had acquired long before modern medicine had named the compounds involved. By the time Eli returned with the bathroom kit, her colour was beginning to change. By the time Eli had set the kit down and stood back, she was breathing differently. By the time Mr. Danforth appeared in the doorway of the kitchen, alerted by the sound of a chain snapping, and having called 2 neighbours to come with him because he was 63 and arthritic and not stupid, Clara Voss's eyes had opened. She looked at the ceiling, she looked at Eli, she looked at the man crouching beside her. "You came," she said. It was not quite what she had meant to say. Yes, he said it the way he had said everything else, without performance, without expecting credit. Behind Mr. Danforth, in the hallway, 2 neighbours from the 6th floor and the landlord, who had come because he lived on the top floor and had heard the chain and was furious about his property, all stood watching. "Eli," she pushed herself to sit. The man steadied her without being asked. "Are you hurt?" "No, Eli had the rabbit by one ear. He made you wake up. I can see that." She looked at the man again. "Derek, I know." Something in his expression changed. The man who had been gentle with her pulse did not disappear. But something else appeared alongside him. Something older and considerably less gentle, and the 2 neighbours in the hallway took a step back without quite knowing why. "Where is he?" She gave him the address Derek had mentioned in passing last week, the one he went to when he wanted to feel like a person with plans. She gave it without hesitation, and she registered, with the clear-headed precision of someone whose professional training had just reasserted itself over her body's panic, that she felt no particular conflict about doing so. She did not see what happened at that address. She would learn, later, that Derek arrived home to find the king of the Vayne Court sitting in his kitchen, and that the conversation that followed involved a very specific financial threat about every account Derek had ever put her name on, and about what public record of certain transactions would do to certain business relationships, and that Derek had made the choices available to people who were offered a chance to disappear cleanly and took it. She only knew that Derek never called again. What she knew, in the kitchen, with the neighbours in the hallway and Mr. Danforth with his hand over his heart and Eli watching with his rabbit, was that the man who had crouched beside her on the linoleum was looking at her now with an expression she did not have clinical language for. He did not stand over her. He lowered himself, slowly and deliberately, until he was at her eye level, and then lower, and he said, with the same quiet he had used on the phone, "You are safe." It was the smallest possible thing to say, and it was exactly the right one. She was aware, distantly, that she was crying. She let it happen. Adrenaline withdrawal, normal, expected, and she had spent enough years apologizing for her own physiology to last a lifetime. He did not ask her to stop. She woke the next morning in a room that was not hers. The ceiling was high and vaulted, with plasterwork she could not identify by period. The light coming through the curtains was the colour of a weak winter morning. The bed was larger than her kitchen, and the sheets were the kind of expensive that you feel in the weight, not the texture. And everything smelled of cedarwood and something older that she did not have a name for. She sat up. Her body felt like something put back together rather than broken, which she knew from professional experience was what effective treatment felt like, rather than what sleeping off a sedative felt like. She did a brief inventory. No lingering numbness, no cognitive fog, full proprioception. Whoever had administered the counteragent had known what they were doing. Eli was asleep in a chair in the corner, curled under a blanket that was too large for him, with the rabbit under his chin. His colour was good. His breathing was even. He had the particular stillness of a child who had been frightened and was now genuinely safe, and his body knew it. She sat with that for a moment. Then she got up, quietly, and found a bathroom with marble the colour of old bone and towels she would not have been able to afford on 3 months of nursing shifts, and a glass of water, and a clean shirt folded on a chair near the bed that was the right size for her, which she did not examine too closely. When she came back into the room, Calder was in the doorway. He was not wearing the suit jacket. He had the look of someone who had not slept, not because he appeared tired, but because he appeared exactly as composed as before. And she had learned enough about people in hospital corridors to know that the ones who look exactly the same at 4 in the morning as they did at noon are the ones who decided a long time ago that exhaustion was not going to be the thing that changed them. He was holding 2 cups of coffee, and he held one out. She took it. They stood on opposite sides of the room, and she looked at the objects on the shelves. Bound ledgers in 3 languages, a glass case containing a timepiece that was not mechanical in any way she could identify, 2 locked document cases, a framed letter in a script she did not recognize. Specific things that told her something about the length of his life without telling her its content. "My name is Calder," he said. "I realize I did not tell you that before." "Clara, you already knew." Yes, how the hospital logs the names of nursing staff. He did not make it sound like surveillance. He made it sound like the kind of thing you check when you give someone your private phone number and want to know if they are real. I looked. She drank the coffee. It was very good. "Eli," she said. He slept within an hour of arrival. He asked 3 questions: whether you were safe, whether he could keep the rabbit, and whether there was breakfast in the morning. He has been informed that yes on all 3 counts. Something in her chest that had been held tight since she had slid down the kitchen wall loosened by approximately half. "I need to get him back to school," she said. "I need to call the hospital and arrange cover for my shift. I need to." She stopped. "I should ask what this is. What you expect." "I expect nothing." His voice was even and unambiguous. "You called a number. I came. That is the whole of it." She looked at him. He looked back. "You broke my chain," she said. "I will replace it." It was a $3 chain. "I will still replace it." She almost smiled. She could feel that she almost smiled, which was the most unusual thing that had happened to her in a week that contained several unusual things. She was about to say something else when the doors at the far end of the room opened without a knock, without a pause, without any indication that the person entering considered it necessary to wait for permission. He was pale in the way old wood is pale, drained of warmth rather than born without it, and he was wearing a coat with a seal on the breast that meant nothing to Clara and apparently meant something significant to Calder, because Calder set his coffee down with a precision that was not care. It was the deliberate act of a man removing a breakable thing from his own hands before he decided what to do with them. Seraphael, his voice was the version of neutral that cost something to hold. The man Seraphael surveyed the room. His gaze moved from Calder to Clara to Illy asleep in the chair with the precise interest of someone taking inventory. "Calder," he spoke without looking away from Clara. "You've created rather a large problem. Leave I will, shortly. I am here on behalf of the Dusk Syndicate's legal compact, which requires a representative to give notice in person." He reached inside his coat and produced a document printed on paper that Clara could tell, from 15 feet away, was not ordinary paper. The woman's name is Clara Voss. She was engaged 11 years ago as a surrogacy carrier for an embryo under Compact 7 of the Interfactional Fertility Agreements. She was paid $80,000, she delivered a healthy child, and she signed a confidentiality accord. Clara stopped breathing. Not the way she had stopped breathing on the kitchen floor. The deliberate kind. "The child she delivered," Seraphael continued, "carries a lineage that grants territorial legitimacy to whichever faction holds his guardianship." The Dusk Syndicate holds the original compact. She was paid for her service, which is complete, and the child should have been transferred at age 5. There was an administrative failure. We are here to correct it. He finally looked at Calder. The woman was under standard non-interference protection as a contracted carrier. You removed her from her place of residence and brought her into your territory. That is a breach of the compact's neutrality clause, and you now stand in violation. The room was very quiet. They want Eli, Clara said. Her voice was the voice she used in the NICU when something was going wrong, and she needed everyone in the room to remain functional. Flat, precise, they want my son. He is technically not your son under compact law, Serafel said, without apology and without cruelty, the way a person states a contractual fact. You were a carrier. The compact is clear. Calder crossed the room in 4 steps and stood between Serafel and the place where Eli slept. You will leave this building, he said. You will carry back to Morn that the child and the woman are under Vayne Court protection, and that any attempt to enforce a compact on my territory will be answered in kind. Serafel folded the document and returned it to his coat. You have always stood alone, Calder, he said it without satisfaction. You have simply not always known it. He looked at Clara one more time, and whatever he saw in her face made him pause for half a second before he turned and walked back through the open doors. They swung shut behind him. Eli slept through all of it. Clara sat down on the edge of the bed because her legs had decided they were done. Eli, she said. They want Eli. They will not have him. You don't. She pressed her fingers against her eyes, the way she pressed them when she was in the middle of something urgent and needed her own brain to be quiet for a moment. I didn't know. I was 22. I needed money for nursing school, and the agency said it was a routine procedure, and I signed something I didn't fully understand, and then I had him, and there was nobody to give him to, and she stopped. She took the breath. He is mine. He has been mine for 7 years, whatever a piece of paper says. I know. I should go. She stood up. I should take him and go somewhere they cannot find us. I am the problem here, not you. I walked into your life, and now you are in violation of their laws because you helped me and Clara. I am the kind of person things happen to. The words came out with the flat certainty of something said many times, something practiced into smoothness from repetition. I do not make choices. I survive them. I survive. And then the surviving makes problems for people around me, and the responsible thing is to remove myself before it compounds. He had crossed the room while she was talking. He stopped at a distance that was close enough to mean something, and far enough to leave her room to move. No, he said. It was not a complex refusal. It was not softened or explained. It was simply a door closed firmly in the path of a thing that was not going to be allowed. You cannot keep me here against my will. I am not keeping you anywhere. I am telling you that what you just described is wrong. He said it the way he had said everything else, with a precision that left no room for doubt, and I will not let you leave believing it. She had not expected him to kneel again. He had done it once, on her kitchen floor, and she had filed it as an emergency medical gesture. A person getting to eye level with someone in distress. She had told herself it was practical. He knelt again in the room with the high ceiling and the ledgers in 3 languages, and this time there was no emergency and no explanation for it, except that he meant to. He was, she calculated, approximately 400 years old, and he was kneeling in front of her, and she did not know what to do with that. Listen to me. His voice was not what she expected from a man in that posture. It was not reverent or theatrical. It was the voice from the phone, from the hospital corridor. The voice of someone who had decided to tell the truth and was taking the time to do it properly. You called a number at midnight. You were barely conscious, and you were afraid, and you called because a 7-year-old boy needed someone to answer. That was not surviving. That was choosing. He let that settle. You gave me your address accurately under sedation. You gave me Derek's location without hesitation. You have been in this room for less than 12 hours, and you have already assessed every exit, every object of weight in this room, and the physical state of everyone who has walked through the door. I have watched you do it. That is not a person things happen to. He looked at her, and whatever was in his eyes was not pity, which was the thing she had been watching for. I did not come to your apartment because I felt sorry for you. I came because I chose to, and I have not, in 411 years, chosen to do very much. He paused. Eli is yours. He has been yours for 7 years, and he will remain so. This is not a declaration of intent. It is a statement of fact. She stood above him and felt something she could only describe as a load-bearing structure releasing, something that had been holding a great deal of weight for a long time, doing its job so consistently that she had stopped being able to feel where it ended and she began. She had been carrying the belief since she was 19. She had picked it up somewhere between a father who called her a lot of effort and a string of situations that seemed to prove him right. And she had carried it the way you carry the things you have decided are simply accurate about yourself. She is the kind of person things happen to. She does not make choices. She survives them. She had just been told, specifically and without sentiment, that every piece of evidence supported the opposite conclusion. She sat down on the floor in front of him. Not to be theatrical about it, because her legs had decided again. I don't know what any of this means, she said. I know. He did not stand up until she was seated. Then he did. We will work out what it means. But you are not leaving, and neither is Eli, and the Dusk Syndicate is going to have to manage their disappointment. That evening, while Calder was in his study with 3 of his counsel and a stack of documents relating to the compact's legal history, Clara sat on the floor of the guest room with Eli and his rabbit, and a deck of cards she had found in the bedside drawer. They were playing a game Eli had invented himself at age 5 that had rules he modified on a round-by-round basis, depending on what cards he was holding. Clara had never won a single game. She was not certain she was supposed to. "Does he live here alone?" Eli said, laying down a 7 with an air of strategic confidence. "I think so. Aldrich lives somewhere close." "Who's Aldrich?" "The tall one, the one who looks like he's been to 1,000 funerals." Eli considered this. He smiled at me at breakfast. Sort of counts. Is he old, like the king?" Clara looked at her cards. "I think everyone here is old in ways we probably should not ask about directly. Is the king nice?" She thought about the case in his breast pocket. The way he had spoken to a 7-year-old in the dark, as if that 7-year-old's account of his mother's breathing was the most important information he had ever received. "Yes," she said. "In his way." Eli laid down 3 more cards in a configuration that seemed to violate everything she understood about the game so far. "Good," he said. "That's what I thought." He won that round. Clara suspected the deck was not entirely standard. She did not investigate. She did not fully understand what she was agreeing to until 3 days later, when Calder brought her into the room that contained the binding. The room was circular and old, carved from something that was not quite stone, and lit by something that was not quite fire. It threw no shadows in the directions shadows should fall. 4 members of the Vayne Court stood at the perimeter, and Calder stood in the centre, with an expression she had learned to read as the one he wore when he was doing something that required both care and the willingness to be refused. He explained it in the same precise register he used for everything. The binding was a mark, a formal claim placed with consent, that would extend to her the protections of Vayne Court territory and grant her, as a specific consequence of the physiology involved, a resistance to the silver compound woven through his boundary wards. The same silver that distressed every other supernatural being who crossed his perimeter. It would not make her supernatural. It would simply make her immune to a particular kind of harm. He told her what it would require from her presence, her consent, and the final step of her own choosing. He told her what it would cost him, a formal declaration that she was his, which was politically irreversible and had not been made in 4 centuries, and which 3 of the 4 people at the perimeter had very clear feelings about, visible on their faces in the way feelings are visible on the faces of people who have not yet learned that he sees everything. He told her she could walk out of the room and he would find another solution. She sat with it the way she sat with a difficult care decision at work, running the logic forward, checking the gaps, looking for the thing she might regret not knowing. Then she reached out and took his hand and turned it over and pressed her palm against his wrist, over the pulse that was slower and steadier than a human pulse, and she said, "This is the last step." He looked at her. "Isn't it?" she said. It was not quite a question. "Yes, then I'm making it." She held his gaze. "Let's finish it." The light in the room changed, and she felt something settle into the structure of her, not painfully, the way a bone set correctly feels different from broken without announcing itself. And when it was done, she felt the same as before, except that the air around her had texture it had not had before, like standing near a current she had previously not been able to perceive. She looked at her hand. She looked at him. "I feel the wards," she said. "Yes, you will learn to tune them out. I can use that." He paused. "In what sense?" "If I can feel the silver compound in the wards, I can tell when something is moving through it. Moving through it would produce a different kind of distress in anything that's sensitive to silver." She thought about it. It would show up as a tremor, fine motor, right hand, probably, given which way the ward runs along the north corridor. The same way peripheral neuropathy presents in a specific hand depending on which nerve is under pressure. He looked at her for a long moment. "You are a nurse," he said. "Yes. You assessed the medical utility of the binding. I assess everything." She looked at the door. What time do Morn's people usually move? They came at 2 in the morning. She was awake. She had been awake since midnight, sitting in the room that was becoming familiar in the way rooms do when you stop treating them as temporary, with Eli asleep in the bed and his rabbit on the pillow beside him. She had been reading a nursing journal on her phone and half watching the door. Because she had done the arithmetic on Morn's timeline, and she did not think he was the kind of man who waited long once a position had been staked. She felt the wards change, not all at once, in the way a power grid fluctuates before a fault. A pressure shift at the perimeter, a series of adjustments working inward from the north wall, and then a direction. Multiple contact points coming from the east corridor and the courtyard simultaneously. She stood up. She went to the medical supply room 2 doors down the corridor, which she had catalogued on her first morning, because cataloguing rooms was what she did whenever she was somewhere new and uncertain, and she took out a sealed glass specimen jar, the kind used for sterile sample transport. That was the right weight and the right circumference. She went back to the room with Eli, and she locked the door from the inside, and she waited. She heard Calder in the hall. She heard the particular quality of sound that a corridor makes when something ancient and deliberate is moving through it at speed, and then she heard the sounds that belonged to a fight, involving someone who had been fighting longer than most people had been alive. She kept her breathing even, and she listened, and she did not open the door. The fighting moved away from her, toward the east corridor. Then something hit the door she was behind with a force that flexed it in its frame, and the lock gave, and the enforcer who came through it was large and dressed in syndicate grey, and built like someone whose job had always been to go through doors rather than open them. His right hand was shaking. She had a half-second to confirm it before he saw her. His eyes went to her first, then to Eli in the bed, then back to her, the rapid reassessment of someone running a threat calculation and arriving at the wrong answer. She stepped into his path. She's not a threat. He spoke into a receiver at his collar. The dismissal of someone who has already moved on to the next problem. She registered the tremor at his wrist, fine motor, right hand, exactly where she had predicted. She drove the specimen jar into the nerve cluster with the precise force of someone who had rehearsed the anatomy in her own mind 4 times in the last 6 hours. And his weapon hand seized, and the gun dropped, and while he was still processing that information, she put her weight through her right knee into the lateral aspect of his, the way the self-defense instructor at St. Ambrose had shown her class 8 years ago, and his leg gave completely. He went down hard. He stared up at her. His expression was the expression of someone who had been given a detailed briefing that had omitted several relevant facts. "She's in the medical room," he said into the collar receiver. His voice had the quality of a man updating a report he had already filed. "With the kid." He stopped. He looked at the specimen jar in her hand. He looked at her face. "She's contained the situation." "I know." She kept her voice at the same register she used for explaining a procedure to a patient who was frightened and needed information, rather than reassurance. "I'm in the medical room." She picked up his gun. She held it in a way that made clear she understood it was not for use, and also that she knew which end was which. Behind her, Eli had not woken up. Clara thought, not for the first time, that her son had made a private decision somewhere around age 4 that external events were not automatically his to manage, and that this quality, which she had always called his steadiness, was going to serve him for the rest of his life. She held the gun and stood over the enforcer and waited. The door opened 40 seconds later. Calder took in the room in one sweep, the enforcer on the floor. Clara standing above him, the gun held in a grip that was competent without being aggressive. Eli asleep, the specimen jar on the floor beside the enforcer's right hand. He looked at her. She looked at him. "He came through the door," she said. "I read the tremor. I see that. Are there more?" "Not any more." She set the gun on the dresser. She sat down on the edge of the bed near Eli, and she permitted herself to notice that her hands were shaking slightly. Adrenaline, normal, expected. She pressed them flat on her knees and breathed. Seraphael Morn was brought into the room by Aldrich 2 minutes later. Aldrich had the look of a man who had seen a great many things in 3 centuries, and was currently revising his ranking of them. Morn looked at the enforcer on the floor. He looked at Clara on the edge of the bed. He looked at the specimen jar. He looked at Calder. He was a man who dealt in political realities, and the political reality visible in the room was this: a woman in Vayne Court territory, standing over his best operative with that operative's own firearm on the dresser behind her, the king's mark on her hand, and the child the syndicate had crossed the city to collect asleep in the bed 6 feet away, and apparently undisturbed by the entire evening. 3 of Morn's remaining enforcers stood in the doorway. 4 members of the Vayne Court Council, who had arrived from the East Corridor in time to watch the last 5 minutes unfold, stood at the perimeter of the room. One of the council members, a woman with silver-streaked hair and the particular expression of someone recalibrating a long-held assessment, had not looked away from Clara since she entered the room. Calder spoke. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. The compact is void. A document signed by a 22-year-old without full disclosure of the parties involved is not enforceable, and you know it. The child has been in the care of his birth mother for 7 years, by her choice and his. You have no legal ground. He waited 1 beat. You have entered my territory with hostile intent and you have moved against someone who is mine. Take what is left of your people and carry back to the syndicate that the Vayne Court holds this ground, and that the terms for any future discussion will require a great deal more than a piece of paper." Morn was quiet for a long moment. The council member with the silver-streaked hair said, to no one in particular, in a voice that carried, she took him down with a specimen jar. It was not admiration, exactly. It was the tone of a person filing a piece of information in a category she had not previously had. Morn looked at Clara one last time. "Congratulations," he said. It was not entirely without irony. "You have married into a war. I'm aware." She did not look away from him. "I've been in difficult situations before. I manage." He left. His enforcers followed. Aldrich followed them out to ensure the departure was complete. The council members dispersed, the silver-haired woman last of all, and she glanced back once at Clara before the door closed behind her. The compound went quiet. She found Calder in the corridor after Eli had been settled back to sleep, and the enforcer had been escorted out by two of Calder's people, and she had picked up the specimen jar and put it back on the supply room shelf, because she was still, fundamentally, a person who returned things to where they belonged. He was standing at the window at the end of the hall. He was looking out at the city, which was doing what cities did at 2:30 in the morning, the amber glow of streetlights on wet tarmac, a delivery truck 3 blocks south, the particular silence that is not silence at all, but the absence of urgency. She came to stand beside him. He did not say anything for a moment. She let it be. "You should know," he said finally, "what you watched me do tonight. I want you to have seen it clearly rather than at a distance, and I want you to decide with that information rather than without it. I'm a nurse." She looked at the city. "I've seen people at the worst moments their bodies have been through. I've made peace with a certain amount of darkness as a category. This is a different category. I know." She paused. "You knelt on my kitchen floor and administered a counteragent from a case in your breast pocket that was obviously not a standard medical kit, and I let you because Eli was in the next room and I was out of alternatives." She turned her head to look at him. "I have known for approximately 3 months what you are. I worked it out from what you said in the hospital corridor and the fact that you gave me a number with no name and the way you moved in my kitchen. The way you moved tonight confirms it." She waited. He turned to look at her. "You knew," he said. "I did, and you called anyway. I called because you were the person who had offered to help." She turned back to the window, and I had told myself for a long time that I did not make choices, and I had just decided that was wrong. She let a beat pass. So I made one. He was quiet. "I am, by the syndicate's assessment," he said, "in a war. Morn will negotiate. He's a legal mind. Legal minds negotiate when the leverage shifts." She had worked through this in the hour since Morn left, and she was confident in the conclusion. He wanted the compact enforced without confrontation. Confrontation changes the arithmetic. He'll send someone with paper in about a week, and it will be different paper. Calder looked at her. "You assessed his legal posture in the hour following a siege. It gave me something to do while Eli slept." She straightened up from the window. "I should go to bed. I need to call the hospital in the morning. I have to arrange a longer leave because I cannot take Eli back to the Sable District right now, and I am not leaving him here alone." She paused. "Thank you. For coming, both times." She walked back down the corridor. Behind her she heard him not say anything, which was, she had come to understand, how he expressed a range of things he had not yet found words for. She had learned to read his silences the way she read a patient's chart. What was present, what was absent, what the gap between the two meant. 3 weeks later, in the kitchen that had become hers in the way rooms become yours when you stop reminding yourself they are temporary, Eli was eating cereal at the counter, and she was reviewing a journal article on post-operative care protocols for a colleague who had emailed asking for her opinion, because she was still a nurse and her colleague still needed her, and that had not changed. She looked up at the cereal box. We're almost out of the one with the dinosaurs. Eli looked at the box. There's still some. There are approximately 4 servings left. I'll need to order more. Can I get the one with the stars instead? She considered this. You have liked the dinosaur one for 8 months. I know. But maybe I want stars now. She looked at the journal article. She looked at the cereal box. Noted, she said. Stars, Calder appeared in the doorway in the way he sometimes did, as if he had been somewhere else, and then simply decided to be here, and he looked at the scene in front of him. A woman reading a medical journal at the counter, annotating the margins with a red pen. A boy eating cereal with a stuffed rabbit on the stool beside him. Clara did not look up from the journal. We need cereal, she said. The one with the stars. A pause. I'll have Aldrich arrange it, he said. Thank you. She turned the page. She had called the Vampire King at midnight, with nothing to offer and no claim on his time. And he had come, and he would tell her, years from now, that he had made the decision somewhere between the Aldermere Hotel and the Sable District, somewhere around the 12-minute mark, that the negotiation with Pierre Tavel could wait another century. She had not known that then. She had simply chosen. If you have ever had to be the steady one in a room full of chaos, and you know what it costs and how it looks to everyone else like it costs nothing, then this story was for you. Like and subscribe if you want more stories about women who are always stronger than anyone around them noticed. Drop a comment below and tell me what was the moment you knew Clara had already decided, and turn on notifications so you do not miss what comes next.